In the 60s, one for the road wasn't just a saying, it was a way of life. A man could finish his drink at the bar, wave goodbye, and drive off without hesitation. If the police stopped you, odds were you'd get a smile and a warning, not handcuffs. Different rules, looser roads. Everyone's name, address, and number sat proudly in the phone book, thick as bricks in every home. You could flip to a neighbor, a teacher, even the town doctor without blinking. Some celebrities stayed unlisted, but everyone else? Plain print. Privacy wasn't a concern. It was expected people could find you if needed. If you were left-handed in school, the teacher likely didn't take kindly to it. They de-smack your knuckles with a ruler and make you switch to the correct hand. Left-handedness was seen as improper, maybe even bad luck. Kids learned to hide it fast. Many grew up writing awkwardly just to meet expectations. In many bars, a woman walking in alone wouldn't be served. The assumption? She didn't belong. Unless she came through a side door marked for ladies, society frowned. No one said much. It was just how it was. Getting into trouble with the police didn't mean paperwork back then. If you were caught joyriding or drinking underage, they might just drive you home and leave it to your parents. A firm talk on the porch carried more weight than a fine. The family was expected to sort it out. Airlines were about more than service. They were about image. Flight attendants had to be young, slim, single, and usually under a certain age. Glamour was part of the job. Seniority meant little if you didn't fit the look. Mothers exhausted by children and housework weren't offered rest or therapy. They got pills. Doctors called them nerve pills and handed them out without blinking. A prescription for peace in a noisy home. No one thought twice. That's how society dealt with women's stress meds over support. Sports weren't gentle. If a kid took a hard hit, got glassy-eyed, the coach might wave smelling salts and send him back in. "You're fine, kid," was the go-to remedy. Concussions weren't understood. Toughness was. You played, no matter how dizzy you were. Autumn had a smell in old neighborhoods, the sweet smoke of burning leaves. Families would rake them into street piles, strike a match, and let them burn. Smoke drifted house to house. It felt like the whole block shared one giant fireplace. Nobody worried about the air. That was just fall in America. Picture sitting in a doctor's office in the early 60s. He lights a cigarette behind the desk. Ashtray beside your chart, puffing away as he says, "You're healthy as a horse." The haze was part of the decor. Rainy days brought out kindness. If you were a child caught walking home, a stranger might stop and offer a lift. You'd hop in. Your parents would thank them later. Danger wasn't the first thought. It was just the neighborly thing to do. Quick errands didn't carry panic. A mom could leave her baby in the car while she dashed into the store. Windows cracked for air. Nobody called it neglect. Neighbors might even peek in and coo at the baby. It was normal. Morning homeroom often began with a Bible verse and prayer. Right after the Pledge of Allegiance. Heads bowed, then lessons began. It was expected. Before debates about church and state, it was just part of school life. The doorbell once meant a salesman with a pitch. He'd step into your living room, lay out a vacuum or encyclopedia, and talk for half an hour. Families listened. Sometimes they bought. It was part of daily life. Strangers welcomed in with promises of a shinier tomorrow. People left their homes unlocked, windows wide open for breeze. Car keys left in ignitions, even while shopping. It wasn't careless. It was trust. Neighbors watched out. Crime felt distant. Looking back, it sounds unreal. But to us, it was just normal life. On the hottest afternoons, kids would wrench open fire hydrants until water blasted the street. It became a makeshift fountain. Traffic crawled through the flood. Nobody called it wasteful. It was how you cooled off. Eventually, police would close it, but for a while, the street was all laughter. Radio contests gave out anything, even live animals. A caller might win a hamster, a fish, maybe a rabbit. Kids begged their parents to dial in, dreaming of a new pet. Factories didn't hold back. Black soot poured from smokestacks, covering laundry and rooftops. Neighbors grumbled, but shrugged. It was the smell of work. Industry was king. Pollution was just the price. Few thought about long-term harm. Progress had its cost. Teenagers cruised downtown on Saturday nights, radios blaring, coolers of beer in plain sight. As long as things stayed calm, the cops looked the other way. A half-empty bottle on the dash didn't raise concern. It was just what kids did. A rite of youth before tighter laws arrived. Girls in school followed one rule: skirts only. Show up in pants, even in snow, and you might get sent home. It wasn't just frowned on, it was enforced. Skirts were proper. That was that. Today it seems absurd. Back then, just the way it was. A woman in the 60s often needed her husband's signature to get credit from a bank or a department store. She could work, earn her own money. But financial freedom, not easily given. Marriage tied her to the system. Institutions enforced it. No one questioned it. Just one of the many quiet walls women lived behind. Office life in the 60s had its own kind of haze, and it wasn't just smoke, but liquor too. Rolling carts clinked down the hallways, loaded with bottles and tumblers. 3 martini lunches were as common as memos. Workers returned to their desks, cheeks pink, ties loosened, typewriters clattering. Productivity might have dipped, but no one seemed to mind. It was just part of the rhythm of business. Farm kids knew the thrill of driving long before getting a license. Tractors, snowmobiles, dirt bikes staken out across fields and frozen lots with no hesitation. Parents waved proudly from the porch. Insurance and accident worries didn't exist. It was about learning through doing, not waiting. Today it might bring the sheriff, but back then it was a rite of passage. A pregnant teacher in the 60s usually didn't stay in the classroom once she started showing. Administrators would politely, quietly, ask her to step away, return after the baby came. It wasn't scandal. It was the belief that students shouldn't see a teacher visibly pregnant. Now it sounds ridiculous, but back then it was seen as basic decorum. Marine parks weren't just about shows. They were about hands-on thrills. Kids rode dolphins, patted sea lions, and lined up for kisses from trained animals. Cameras flashed, crowds cheered, and nobody asked if the animals were okay. It was sold as clean family fun. Today, it would raise alarms. Then, it was a vacation highlight. Babysitting was rarely a job for teenagers. Often, it was handed to 12-year-olds. You could watch 3 or 4 kids till midnight, make 50 cents an hour, and raid the snack cabinet. No one questioned your maturity. Parents believed kids were capable, and it gave them a cheap night out. Behind many homes stood a brick incinerator, chimney puffing in the evening air. Families tossed in trash paper, plastic, leftovers, and watched it burn. Smoke curled lazily through the neighborhood like it belonged there. Garbage pickup was limited, so burning your own was routine. Pollution wasn't a word people used. It was just how you kept your yard clean. Homemade fireworks were traded like toys. In the 80s, cherry bombs, bottle rockets passed between kids behind garages. Someone always dared someone else to light one off. It didn't need to be the 4th of July. Any summer night would do. Adults frowned, but didn't interfere much. Today it'd mean confiscation and phone calls. Back then, it was called mischief. Picture a college lecture hall hazy with cigarette smoke. Ashtrays were built right into the chairs. Professors lit up mid-sentence. Students struck matches beside them. You could barely see the blackboard through the gray. It didn't seem strange. It was just how learning looked back then. The room smelled more like a bar than a school. Primetime TV in the 60s was filled with cigarette ads. Velvet voices promised flavor, pleasure. Actors in lab coats claimed certain brands were doctor-recommended. Whole families sat together and memorized the jingles. Cigarette ads ran right between family sitcoms and the evening news. No one questioned it. It was part of the living room. Trampolines were nothing like today's padded cages. Just bare springs and stretched fabric over dirt. No nets, no sides. You bounced until you flew off. Then you got up, wiped your knees, and bounced again. Broken bones were part of the fun. Parents didn't panic. They figured it built character. When a thermometer broke, the silver mercury beads were pure magic. Kids scooped them up and rolled them in their hands. Nobody screamed. Teachers sometimes demonstrated how it separated and rejoined. No gloves, no warnings, no cleanups. It was science and wonder rolled into one. Cigarettes weren't just in homes. They were everywhere. On planes, in hospitals, grocery stores, and even teachers' lounges. Ashtrays sat out like centerpieces, always in use. Smoke trailed through workdays, dinners, even operating rooms. Now it's unthinkable. Then, it was simply part of the air we breathed. Newspaper job listings were split down the middle. Help wanted male, and help wanted female. Men's jobs meant trades, offices, or management. Women's jobs? Mostly secretarial, teaching, or nursing. No one questioned the setup. It was just how society divided the workforce. 5-year-olds often stood proudly on the front seat of the car, waving to truckers as their dad drove. Seat belts, if they existed, were ignored. No booster seats, no buckles. No one gave it a second thought. Children leaned over dashboards, giggling at passing cars, riding as free as birds. Safety wasn't the focus. The ride itself was the joy. Car interiors were built for space, not protection. 7 people could squeeze across a wide bench seat, with toddlers on laps and elbows in ribs. Seat belts? Half the time they were stuffed deep into the cushions. A trip to church or a Sunday drive looked more like a rolling living room than a vehicle. Today, it would draw gasps. Back then, it was just family travel. Cribs, window frames, and toys gleamed in cheerful colors, most of them coated in lead-based paint. Nobody panicked when toddlers gnawed on chipped corners. The paint even had a sweet taste. Parents didn't worry. Doctors rarely warned. Entire houses were filled with it. What we now call dangerous was invisible then, hidden in vibrant colors and trusted surfaces. Hazardous chemicals sat in the simplest of places. Reused soda bottles, old pickle jars, coffee tins lined up on garage shelves. Inside, gasoline, paint thinner, antifreeze, pesticides. No child safety caps, no warning labels. Bright colors made them tempting. Kids had no idea. Today it would be a disaster waiting to happen. Back then, it was just practical storage. A BB gun was a standard gift for many grade school boys. Handed over with a smile, maybe a wink. A tin of pellets and a weekend of backyard cans, fence posts, and target practice followed. Parents trusted kids to manage it. Sure, accidents happened, but it wasn't seen as dangerous to a boy. It was freedom in his hands. Doctors in the 60s had a pill for every problem, including weight. Pep pills, often amphetamines, were handed out casually to boost energy or curb appetite. Housewives took them. Athletes, too. Side effects? Rarely mentioned. A signature and a smile were enough. What seems reckless now was then called medical advice. Privacy wasn't guarded. It was published. Newspapers printed full names, addresses, and birthdays, whether you won a contest, made the honor roll, or had a baby. Strangers could learn where you lived without anyone blinking. It wasn't seen as risky. It was seen as neighborly. A way to keep people connected. Home appliances in the 60s weren't built with safety in mind. Space heaters sparked. Toaster cords frayed. Hair dryers overheated without warning. People shrugged, used them anyway. Fire hazards were bad luck, not product flaws. Convenience came first. Somehow, most homes got by. Toys looked bright and fun, but weren't safe. Metal trucks had sharp edges and were painted with lead. Small parts snapped off. Pieces became choking hazards. Nobody raised alarms. Ads called them tough and built to last. Cuts and bruises were part of growing up. Today they'd be recalled. Back then, they were just toys. Roadside zoos dotted highways' hand-painted signs inviting families to pull over. For a few bucks, kids could pet a tiger on a chain, pose with a monkey, or feed a bear through cage bars. No real fences. No real rules. Parents snapped photos with pride. It wasn't called dangerous. It was called Sunday fun. Safety wasn't first. Fun was. Playgrounds were built on asphalt. No padding. Slides were metal and searing hot by noon. Monkey bars scraped your palms. Merry-go-rounds spun at wild speeds. You got burned, bumped, and bruised, and ran back for more. That was just recess. At gas stations, big sedans idled inside closed garages. Mechanics smoked while they worked. Exhaust built up. Tobacco thickened the air. No one opened a door or worried about fumes. Carbon monoxide wasn't a household term. They focused on fixing engines, not filtering air. And somehow, they made it to dinner. When fights broke out on school grounds, it wasn't the police who showed up. The gym teacher stepped in, or maybe the principal. Kids got separated, scolded, and often forced to shake hands. No court visits. Parents rarely heard a word. Discipline happened fast, and it stayed in the yard. Most boys carried a pocket knife. Teachers didn't blink. Some kept one in their desk drawer. It was a tool, not a weapon. Kids whittled at recess, sharpened pencils with blades. Today it would trigger lockdowns. Back then, it meant you were growing up. Public transit was far from cushy. Buses rattled with open windows. Commuter trains sweltered without air conditioning. Smoking was allowed in sections, but smoke drifted everywhere. You sweated in your seat, surrounded by ashes and heat. No one complained. Getting there was enough. Los Angeles in the 60s was famous for two things: palm trees and smog. The air was so thick it stung your eyes. Weather forecasts reported heavy haze, like it was a natural element. Kids played outside anyway. Parents shrugged. Cars, factories, and freeways kept humming. Today it would make headlines. Back then, it was just another sunny day in L.A.